That's right, Georgia fans. The Bulldogs are the team chomping on the bone you really need to pay attention to in the SEC East, as Kirby Smart has himself a legitimate national championship contender as they feast on a bye week before taking on the beloved Gators next week in Jacksonville. Anthony Dasher, managing editor for AugustSports.com, will join us later in the show to keep us informed on everything Georgia football. Of course, Dan Shonka will be with us to break down the top Georgia players to watch the rest of the season and for the 2018 NFL Draft, as well as several other top college performers, including Keshawn Johnson of Fresno and David Sills of West Virginia. And in the NFL, don't forget, we've got a whole bunch of other topics to discuss, including Carson Wentz and exactly how he's taking on the Philadelphia Eagles challenge, first place Eagles that is, some other rookie and second-year wide receivers that you'll need to consider for your fantasy teams, and much more as the Ourlads Football Network with Dan Shonka on Prime Sports Network starts now. All right, well, the 2018 Ourlads NFL Draft preview is out and available to purchase at ourlads.com because it's never too early to talk about the NFL Draft. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and that's what we do here each Wednesday on the OFN. And time to introduce my first guest, GM and National Scout for Ourlads Scouting Services, Mr. Dan Shonka. So, Dan, I've been touting the Bulldogs now for weeks, and I feel pretty confident this team can take the SEC and beat Alabama in the championship game when the time comes. What's your reaction to that prediction?
Well, I'll tell you, if anybody knows how to defend Alabama, it would be Kirby Smart. So,
yeah.
He I tell you, I think, it's marching on to that. Georgia keeps getting better, and as long, the big thing is the health. As long as Chubb stays healthy and Sonny Michael stays healthy, and their defense. We're going to talk about John Atkins, the nose tackle, their pass rushers, Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy, but that's the same with any team. I think eventually, the next few years when they get a chance when Georgia gets a chance to recruit more and build up some depth, they'll be really tough to, they can afford to lose some people and then go ahead and make up for that. So, but no, I'm with you. I think Georgia is an excellent football team, and I think we're going to see it play out here the next few weeks.
Yeah, they did not play Alabama last year, which was Kirby's first season, so maybe that's a good thing. Obviously, they're a lot better in year two, as often occurs with new coaches, especially coaches, first-time head coaches like Smart. So maybe they get Alabama where they're not going to be intimidated or anything like that. Of course, I mean, the thing that you'll also like about their chances is the fact that they're in a different division, so they don't have to play Alabama unless they play them in the national championship, in the SEC championship game. And even if they lose one of their last 5 games following the bye, they will probably, more than likely, and I can guarantee it, play in the playoffs by beating Alabama in the SEC championship game. And that's a good kind of rabbit to have in your hat, at the end of the season in case they do drop one of those last 5 games.
Yeah, I don't know anybody on that on the horizon, until they get to the SEC championship game who can beat them. Do you?
No, I mean, Florida is next, and they just have I can't imagine Florida's going to be able to move the ball at all against Georgia, that without their quarterback situation, their players being suspended. I don't see any of those kids coming back this year. I think for what they're being suspended for, they're lucky they're not in jail. So I don't think that's going to change. Of course, Del Rio's out for the year. And then Auburn, which would have been a tough game earlier this season, I think they proved again last week against LSU that offensively, Stidham, he just doesn't have what it takes to be a dynamic. It's not just Stidham, it's the receivers. Whenever Stidham does get the ball in the receivers' hands, like anything past 5 or 10 yards, they drop it. So they've got no passing game. It's basically Johnson in the running game, the really good defense, but they're getting absolutely nothing in the passing game.
No, and really, that's what is needed at Auburn, because they want to spread things out so they can run the ball. They want to set up the run with their passing game, and hey, if nobody respects those receivers or your quarterback to throw it, then that kind of bottles up your running game.
It will be a good game at the end of the season, though, at Georgia Tech. I mean, Johnson's got that team playing really well this year, almost beat Miami. last week. The Hurricanes needed a second consecutive last-second win to beat the Jackets. And the Jackets and Paul Johnson are always going to be dangerous whenever he's got a quarterback, and he's got that kid Taquan Marshall, who's doing a really good job under center. So considering the Jackets beat him last year, and they've beaten him 2 out of the last 3 years, that could be a dangerous game if Georgia goes in there with 1 loss. But again, as long as they go even into that game undefeated, and then you beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, you're going to the playoffs. So
you're right, and the thing is that you're exactly right. That Georgia Tech game is dangerous though because of that offense,
yep.
and you don't see that offense, and I'm telling you, you've got to be very disciplined on defense. And in fact, I hate looking at anybody that plays like Army, Navy, Georgia Tech, their defense and offensive packages. I just it drives me batty because you can't evaluate pro prospects because they got completely different assignments.
All right, now we've talked about these Georgia players already this season, different spots during the season, but we figured since I'm going to be talking to Anthony Dasher a little bit later on, we can once again just take a look at the top players. We mentioned Chubb. Everybody knows Chubb by now, but of course the injury situation, the knee injury, that's what everybody's got their fingers crossed, and he could remain healthy. But it helps that he doesn't have to do all the running because of Sony Michel. So, but both guys are graduating this year. So this is it. This is their last chance. What's the difference between both running backs, and when the NFL GMs and scouts are taking a look at them, how are they separating the two? What type of teams are saying, okay, I think I prefer a Chubb over a Michel or vice versa?
Right. Well, and that's exactly right. It's going to depend on your preference, but I think they're both going to fit into a rotation in the NFL. Chubb, to me, is that inside guy that just cuts off things, the blocks, and sticks his foot in the ground, gets north and south very quickly. He's a little bit stockier build and a little thicker type build. Michel is, again, you're going to like him back there because he catches the ball well, can really explode when he gets in that next level. So both of those guys are NFL backs. So it's just a matter strictly, on your particular preference. Chubb's a little more compact, like I said, which theoretically will, keep you from getting those big hits or more healthy from getting hammered. But, he's got that great body lane. He's set all kinds of records in the SEC, which is, they know how to play defense there. So,
yep.
But there's times though that while I'm studying film, I'll say, hey, Michel might be the guy, and then other times you look and, Chubb's the guy. So it's it's just your particular teams, because they're all going to rotate back. There won't be featured guys, like the Gurleys and things like that. But they'll certainly, fit in.
All right, and Michel's also has an injury history too. They both have had injury histories, and hopefully they'll remain healthy the rest of the season. And their quarterbacks are really young. Eason was only a sophomore. Looks like he's ready to go, but they're sticking with Fromm for now. We'll see how that goes. Look, it's really good, especially we've talked about the quarterback situation in college football a lot, and just look at Florida. I mean, take a look at some of these schools, and LSU, and they got 2 of them, Georgia and Eason and Fromm. So, if anything happens where Fromm has a bad game, if he's struggling, they could always bring Eason in, and Eason would probably take over for the rest of the season. So it's a nice luxury for Kirby Smart to have. Also on offense, what about Payne, Christian Payne, who's a fullback, and Jeb Blazevich, who's a tight end? These are guys, are we looking at middle to late round draft picks?
Yeah, probably more like, it's probably, 6th, 7th priority free agent. It all kind of depends how things shake down, but Blazevich, he blocks well in the run game, and he's going to be a particular pick for somebody that would fit in their offense. And then again, Payne, this year there's so many fullbacks out there, which is amazing because not many NFL teams are using fullbacks these days. They're putting linebackers at fullback or nose tackles or somebody else at fullback now. But Kane's another one of the several fullbacks that are out around the country this year. They're are very productive, and they do their job by lead blocking and getting that second level and picking off linebackers.
All right, on defense, Georgia's got Josh Atkins, a senior, Trent, a couple of inside guys, Atkins and Trenton Thompson. Thompson's had some injury issues this year. And then they also, if you take a look at their linebackers, you've got Raquan Smith, you've got Lorenzo Carter, and then also Davin Bellamy. And then in the deep patrol, you got Dominic Sanders. So a lot of these guys are seniors. So that just shows you how maybe not a surprise why this defense is clicking on all cylinders. A lot of veterans, been around here for a while, second year Kirby March system. Any of these guys, like who has anybody here? Would Carter be the guy that has a chance to maybe slip into the second round?
Yeah, I think Carter has a chance. I mean, he's that long, rangy guy. I mean, he's 6'6", he's 242. He's built a lot like Key from LSU. Key put a little more weight on this year. Was about this size last year, really, and then he put on more weight. But yeah, they're rangy guys that can get in there, get their hands up, or they're kind of slippery. You can't really lock in to block them. And then Bellamy on the other side is kind of that blue collar tough guy that just keeps. He's again around 6'5", 240, and depending on what team wants them in their scheme, it's great if you play some zone and stuff. You drop those guys back into coverage. They're so tall, the quarterback can't throw over the top of them when they're dropped into coverage and everything. But if you want to play the run, they don't have a lot of beef up there. Like you're playing 300-pounders every single day, including when people go overload packages with they'll bring another offensive lineman. So hey, you got 600 pounds going to try to move you out of there, and 240, 245 doesn't cut it.
Yeah, this is not. They don't have maybe the specific star on their defense that'll be a first round can't miss prospect, but there's just a lot of good depth. And again, mostly seniors, a couple of juniors, and a very good defensive coordinator turned head coach that doing their job. So this is a very dangerous team. I really believe in what they're doing. I'm looking forward to that because I'm going to be shocked if we don't see a Georgia-Alabama SEC championship game. So I'm really looking forward to that because we haven't seen Alabama tested in the SEC championship game for a few years. Those Florida games, the last couple of years, and then Missouri before that. That's not exciting us. We'd like Alabama to be tested in the SEC championship game, and I think they'll be tested with Georgia this year for sure.
No question about it. I tell you, I'm looking forward to that one too, and I hope everybody stays healthy and they pick off wins as they go.
All right, let's go to a few more college kids before we throw in some NFL players. First of all, Mark Andrews had the game-winning touchdown for Oklahoma in another tough battle with rival Texas. And we've talked a lot about Andrews the last couple of years. He broke out as a freshman with 7 touchdowns, had a better year statistically last year, even though he equaled with 7 touchdowns. But he's all of a sudden he's ahead of his career marks already with 23 catches, 31 last year. And only needs 30 yards to surpass his career best of 489 yards from last year. And, of course, the third touchdown was the big one against Texas on Saturday. When I watch Mark Andrews play, and the more I watch him play, the more I realize that this guy is going to be a difference maker at the next level.
He is. I'd say, he is one of those classic NFL-type tight ends that he can be a real threat in the red zone. And you saw the other day, he runs a wheel route down the sideline.
Yeah.
And, there was nobody close to him. And but that was a bust, in the Texas secondary. But, hey, nevertheless, takes it in, and then he made some great one-handed catches early in the year. And so the big thing is he just got to stay healthy, and but if he does, you can count on him probably going that second round somewhere, as long as he passes all the health things,
I mean, is he your if he does come out, and being that he is an underclassman, and your guide that your first preview that just came out that's available right now basically lists the underclassmen, the top underclassmen in a different section than the top seniors. So I always have to ask you, who do you like better? So you have the kid from South Dakota State as your top senior tight end, but would Mark Andrews be your top tight end overall?
Yeah. In fact, our top 33 right now, Andrews we got him at 28.
In the first round.
We got Dallas Goddard at 32. So yeah, Mark is, right there, that he'll be in that 28 to 33, but once people start coming out officially and all that, we'll see how that shakes down. But I think when the smoke clears, again, as long as, he passes physicals and all that stuff, I think, you could see him in the second round.
Yeah, and again, the top 33 is right there on the homepage. You can click that and check out what the latest is or the early indication is as far as Dan Shonka and Ourlads for the 2018 draft, the top 33 players. All right, let's talk about a player that I'm not so sure a lot of people know who this player is. They know the name, even though it's a different spelled name, completely different person, but Keyshawn Johnson, the junior receiver from Fresno. And by the way, I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow. I'm going to be interviewing a football writer, Robert Kawada from the Fresno Bee, because really like what I saw at Fresno this past weekend, just destroying a pretty good New Mexico team. And is it a big surprise to see Fresno all of a sudden relevant again now that Jeff Tedford has taken over? It's only been a few months, and he's already got that program after one win last season looking relevant again. And part of the reason is they bring in the transfer Marcus McMarrion at quarterback. But Keyshawn Johnson, they're really excited about him. They were excited about him before the season began. He had 773 yards receiving last year with 66 catches. He has 50% of that already this year with 33. But he made a tremendous one-handed catch in the corner of the end zone, a couple of touchdowns last week. And again, now this kid's only a junior, but what do you like about him so far?
Well, he's got good size, and he's being coached in basically a pro-style system. I mean, I always liked Tedford. I thought he was, I liked him at Cal, but I think things just kind of went downhill. You get some coaches changed and things like that, and you don't recruit, and you get a couple bad recruiting years, and, then you're in trouble. But, no, these guys will be well schooled in NFL route running and things like that. So I think that that's the big thing. Productivity right now and his ability to win 50-50 balls.
Yeah, when you take a look at a guy like Johnson, because you're so invested in the seniors, and then of course you got a lot of the juniors that are on the table from the beginning of the season that you may have been following for a couple of years, and you really scouted maybe some of those guys incidentally or not. Guys like Johnson, who may be late bloomers and from a losing program, and maybe you don't get to watch as much film as you would with some of the other players. What is it that you look for when you take a look at this week and they're at San Diego State? I mean, now that's as big as it's going to get for them. Are those the types of games where you say, you know what, now it's time for me to spend a little time taking a look at some of the players on Fresno, especially because of the matchup situation?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to see these guys against the best competition that they play and everything. And then, when you start getting buzz out there from West Coast scouts and things saying, hey, better take a look at this guy. I don't know if he'll come out, but this is one of the top junior wide receivers on the West Coast. And so then, you get so, and it's good to let, because right now we're basically at mid-season, 6 games in, 7 games in. Some of these, where the guys, some of these guys are just really starting to develop right now. So by the end of the year you like to look at them a little bit at mid-season if you can, and then look at them late, and you can see their development, how much they've improved.
Another receiver I wanted to ask you about before I move over to one defensive player and then a couple of NFL ones is David Sills. He had a big game to start the season at West Virginia against Virginia Tech in that game in Landover, and then and it was okay. Well, who's this David Sills guy? Well, apparently David Sills was a former four-star Rivals quarterback,
Yep.
and then played wide receiver his first year, scored the game-winning touchdown in the Cactus Bowl. But then after that, he decided to transfer, and he decided to transfer to El Camino College, where he played quarterback. Because he wanted to play quarterback, he wasn't going to get the gig. He figured, okay, this is where I'm going to get my best opportunity. So now he decides he's coming back. He's willing to play wide receiver for West Virginia, gets back into the program. He's about 6'3", 6'4", great size. And lo and behold, 600 yards receiving, 39 catches, 12 touchdowns for the Mountaineers. And when you got a player with that much size, and it seems like every time they get the ball over to him, he catches it, you got to open your eyes.
Yeah, and the other backstory about him, right? He was a kid that Kiffin signed as a 14-year-old or 15-year-old prospect, or 12 or 12-year-old, whatever it was, as a quarterback.
Yeah.
And or I guess he didn't sign him, but he got a verbal commitment or offered him a scholarship, I guess, when he was that age. And that goes to tell you. Don't do stupid stuff like that. Let the kids play it out. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, if he would have got him as a wide receiver, he would have been in high cotton wherever he was coaching at.
Yeah, and look, it's a nice story. Who knows if he's going to decide to come out or not? I mean, maybe not. I mean, Greer's a junior too. It would be nice to see them come back next year. But he's having a great year, so. We'll keep our eye on Greer. He's got some big games coming up later this season, especially the last game of the season in Norman. So that'll give him an opportunity to open some more eyes. Taven Bryan, last player I wanted to ask you about in college. Really haven't been able to see much about him this year, even though, I mean, you've seen him in spurts here and there. Florida, again, it's about their defense because they can't do nothing on offense. But it wasn't until this Texas A&M game. But boy, he had a few plays and a few series back to back against the Aggies where he was just dominant, and they've been waiting for him to play like that in Florida. He's had a nice little career, but he hasn't been the dominant player yet. But hey, you know what? He's still young. He still has time to develop. He's only a junior. Have you had an opportunity to see much of him yet and decide whether or not you think he's got the potential to be a really good player?
No, I tell you what, we haven't studied him yet at all, and so he's on the back burner right now. But hey, I love defensive linemen, and I think now here's a guy that's from Wyoming, and he's down there in Florida. Usually in Florida, you can find your speed and stuff like that, but he is a transfer junior, and so he's. That's why, some of these guys, you got to let them play out a little bit, you know what I mean? Or I'm sorry, redshirt junior. And you got to let it play out. And he's one of those kind of guys you got to do that with. And everybody, I tell you, unbelievable how many people ask about all these juniors, but there's some of these guys that has no idea that they're coming out or not,
Well, he'll be going up against Georgia a week from Saturday, and that'll be like the last big opportunity for him before Florida State this season. At the end of the season to show his stuff. So we'll see exactly how Georgia can contain him and what kind of rest of the season he has, because he could be a player on the rise. In the NFL, Carson Wentz, we've talked a lot about him in the last year or two. He's leading the Eagles now to a first place run in the NFC East. And this is really not surprising. We talked a lot about what was so good about him and interesting about him heading into the draft when he came out. And now he's had a full season to develop under Peterson. And, he's not the finished product just yet, but he's an exciting looking player. And as bad as the position can be at times in the NFL, if you're an Eagle fan, you got to be feeling real good about the fact that you've got this kid and many years ahead with him, because he's going to be around doing a lot of good stuff for the Eagles.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a flatliner. You know, he doesn't let that outside noise or the white noise bother him. He'll go out and shoot a deer or something, you know, on Monday and when it's day off. You know, he doesn't pay attention to all the nonsense that goes on. And I think that stable guy at quarterback who, you know, all he wants to do is good things and not worry about the baloney that goes on in the NFL. The Eagles were, you could say, lucky to get him, but hey, the way that was their target, and they planned and moved up to get him, and they got their guy, and he's paying big dividends.
Yeah, it's actually looking like it could be a heck of a 1-2 punch there with actually a top three out of the top four in Wentz, Goff, and Dak Prescott so far from last year's draft class. So looking promising. Before I let you go, the receivers. I know there are a lot of fantasy players out there. Don't know a whole lot about college, but they try. You know, they find out real soon when these players turn pro if they get off to a good start, and sometimes when guys are a little slow, like last year's top receivers on your depth chart. Josh Doxson and Laquan Treadwell, they're now just starting. Matter of fact, Treadwell had maybe his best game, which was last week.
Great catch, too.
Yeah.
Remember that catch? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Now, see, that's what you saw him do at Ole Miss, you know, and make that great catch and help his quarterbacks out and stuff like that. But it must have been a little, because he's from he's from Chicago, so I thought, well, hey, here's a guy going to go north. He's not going to be bothered, you know, by cold weather like some of the guys are stuff, but it might have been a learning situation, maybe, you know, because he was stayed basically on one side and he has to learn multiple positions and things. And so, you know, I don't know that 100%, but that might have been a learning situation in a lot of different formations and things and the way you run routes and all that. But yeah, he and of course, Doxson he had an injury.
Yeah.
You know, that was his problem coming right in and, fighting through injury and stuff like that. And he was out for quite a while. And like you said, he's just starting to get into it now. So yeah, both those guys have got a load of talent. And, but hey, sometimes receivers come in and they blow it up real easy. It all depends on where they go and what they're asked to do.
Is there, if you had a preference, I mean, did you have one? Because I know you ranked them very closely. Of who you think right now, after a year in the NFL, if you had to decide which guy might actually play better this year or in the next couple of years, who would you lean towards, Doxson or Treadwell?
Well, I think that Doxson's has more consistency, you know, being at Washington, and you got, Cousins.
You got Cousins,
but
yeah.
Then if he changes quarterbacks, you know, but Treadwell, geez, he's had so many quarterbacks there throwing to him. You don't really know, so really the jury's out on both of them. But you know what you see early in regards to route running and things like that, you say Doxson, but then you like Treadwell's physicalness. So it's just it just depends on the type of scheme you put him into, and if they see how they continually develop, and but like I said, I did like Treadwell because of his physical ability and all that at first, and then I liked Doxson's speed, and he used to catch everything. I saw him drop one for the Redskins a game or two ago, but they both may be running neck and neck here.
And then finally, Juju Smith is starting to get more attention with the Steelers, even though the Steelers' offense isn't going well. But now Martavis Bryant wants to get traded, so Juju Smith's taking some of his receptions away, that's for sure. So. But we've always talked about those USC receivers and never know what we're going to get with those. But you ranked Zay Jones a little bit better than Juju Smith, and Zay's had some issues, target issues. I think when I looked last week, he had like 5 receptions on 22 targets. So there's something not going right with Taylor and Jones. They're just not on the same page right yet. Maybe with the bye week, they'll get on it because they need it, because the Bills are suffering right now at receiver with Matthews out and Clay out. But you have a lot of confidence, though, based on what we talked about with Zay Jones before the draft.
Yeah, the thing that I liked is he does the rare thing, catches everything. You know, I mean, he was a guy that caught the ball. He's had a few of his drops too, and the NFL ball is a little bit different shape than you get in college and things, and you just have to get. But that nevertheless, Jones has got really good hands, and I think that, like you said, the timing between him and Taylor, and then the routes he's asked to run, and seems like the emphasis is big on defense there and in Buffalo, and like the offense is kind of being brought along. The offensive line is coming along now and stuff, and but yeah, I would expect Jones to be, a lot better the second half of the season.
All right, and then Juju Smith is still debate whether or not he's going to be a legitimate number 2 alongside Santonio Brown. You think it helps to have Roethlisberger there, but we don't know how long he's going to be. But he's off to a pretty good start, Smith.
Yeah, Antonio Brown. You think it's Antonio Holmes?
Oh yeah, Antonio Brown. Correct. No,
that was a Freudian slip there. Yeah, Holmes is.
That's Antonio. That's a combination there.
And I tell you, any is that, except probably better than San Antonio or is. But anyway, no, Juju. Hey, to me, they can get rid of Bryant. Bryant's a malcontent, an inconsistent guy. Yeah, he'll make that great catch between his legs. Hey, here's a guy shoots his mouth off and then he's suspended. So why are we counting on you? Send him out of there. You know what I mean? I tell you how important he is to the offense at Pittsburgh. Take a bucket of water, you stick your finger in it, and you pull your finger out, and the hole is left over. That's how important Bryant is to the Steeler offense. I'd send him out of there and then work Juju, and of course throw as much as I could to Brown, and then also give it as much as I could to that guy behind me, 26. So, hey, I mean, he was a pain in the rear end at Clemson.
Yeah,
Bryant was.
Yeah.
And he did all kinds of stupid things, and it hasn't changed. So hey, if he wants to go, first of all, I don't know if anybody would want to trade for him, but hey, get him out of there.
Yeah. And Juju Smith will open up an opportunity for him. Dan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday.
Thanks a million, Greg.
You got it. That's Dan Shonka. And, of course, he's with us every Wednesday as we talk about the players to keep an eye on for the 2018 NFL Draft and some of these players who were juniors, possibly into the 2019 NFL Draft. And, of course, also some of the young rookies and second-year players in the NFL. All right, Anthony Dasher is coming up in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to talk more about what's going on with Georgia. Also, a little bit later on this week, tomorrow, I've got 3 interviews scheduled with beat writers who are covering the Fresno State and UAB and Texas A&M programs. So Robert Kuwata from the Fresno Bee will be with me tomorrow. Steve Irvine, who's a color analyst for UAB football and a writer for Blazers 247, will be with me tomorrow. And Olin Buchanan, Texas A&M football columnist at texags.com, will also be with me tomorrow. So we'll find out what's going on with those programs. And again, we talked about Keyshawn Johnson from Fresno State. So they're off to a nice start inside the Mountain West Conference, which is wide open. And look, that San Diego State game becomes huge. But San Diego State losing to Boise and not looking good doing it. Now, there were some turnovers in the game. Matter of fact, early in the game, it wasn't like Boise State looked like the old Boise State. San Diego State basically just handed San Diego State handed Boise the game early. You had yourself an Avery Williams punt return touchdown. That's actually his second of the season for the Broncos. And also a fumble return touchdown gave Boise a 14-0 lead that San Diego State was never able to come back from. But for Fresno, they're 3-0 with Marcus McMaryion as the starting quarterback. So McMaryion, who came in for Chase Vigil, is doing a great job. Excellent move by Jeff Tedford to get McMaryion to come in as a transfer late in heading into the season. And it's paying out big time for the Bulldog program. 1 win last season, 3 wins in 2015. And we talked about the whole situation with DeReader for the couple of years prior. If you had listened to us for a few years, we told you how we just didn't like the way that program was going. Even when they went to the Mountain West Conference Championship game in 2014, they didn't have a very good season that season. And after that, things went downhill. They just weren't a very good team when Derek Carr left. And DeRita was lucky he was able to get there with Carr. As soon as Carr left, the program went down the tubes. He gets fired. Jeff Tedford comes in. And lo and behold, the Fresno State program is looking good again. So that's going to be a really interesting game on Saturday at San Diego State. And we'll talk more about that on Friday's college football show. All right, let's get back to talking Georgia football. As we said, we're going to now introduce our second guest of the program. Is the managing editor for UGAsports.com, covering Georgia football and also part of the Rivals Sports Network, Anthony Dasher. Anthony, thanks for talking to us today.
Hey, my pleasure.
All right, Anthony. So I was talking with Dan about a lot of the players, some of the players that may be the most notable kids on the team who have really produced and maybe coming out in the next year or two that you'll see in the draft. But these kids that I'm going to ask you about, first of all, at quarterback, they're not going to be looking at the draft anytime soon because they're freshmen and sophomores, true freshmen and true sophomores. But I want to start, first of all, with Fromm. Fromm took over for Eason in the beginning of the season with Eason's injury. And I guess they've been working Easton slowly back in, but Fromm seems to still have the job. Is that how it's going to work? Is Fromm going to hold on to the job?
Yeah, Fromm is the quarterback. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. I mean, we saw that as proof last week when Jacob Eason didn't come in the game at all when Georgia had the big lead. I mean, this is all just Jake Fromm's team. Won't be seeing Jacob Eason unless there's another big lead or Kirby Fields. That Jake Fromm doing a job, but so far I think he really exceeds everyone's expectations. And right now, this is a team that, that he's the quarterback, the players believe in him, and I don't see him making a change whatsoever.
When did that decision, you think, was there a specific time that it happened? What impressed Kirby Smart enough at what moment to say this is now his team?
Well, he hasn't actually come out and said that. You just tell by the way things have gone for Georgia this year. I mean, Georgia hasn't had to throw the ball a lot when they have. I mean, Jake has been very efficient. He's actually you look at the starting quarterbacks in the SEC right now. His efficiency rating is number 1.
Yep.
So he's getting the job done. He's doing exactly what he's been asked to do, and he's getting better each week.
All right. How's everything going though with that defense? That defense has been absolutely fantastic this season. We went over a whole list of players, seniors, juniors. This is a veteran group. Which guys kind of stick out to you, though, amongst all that talent? Who's really impressed you?
Well, Roquan Smith is the guy, I think. I mean, there's a lot of good players in this defense. I think there's a lot of guys on this defense who will play on Sundays. But right now, Roquan Smith, middle linebacker, is really playing out of his mind. And we've always thought he was a very good player, and he's proven that this year. I know the Associated Press released his midseason All-American team. He was on the first unit of that. And the thing about Roquan, he's just got just tremendous speed. He's a guy who can play sideline to sideline. Can make all the plays you want your middle backer to do. Is getting running backs coming up the middle of the line, and he can just really do it all. And I think he's predicted by a lot of people to be a first round draft pick. He come out as a junior.
Okay. And overall, you take a look at Kirby Smart as a coach, first-time head coach. Of course, we know what kind of defensive acumen he had coming over from Alabama. A little bit of a transition last year. This is obviously his team now, and they're leading by defense. At least that's the way it's looked early on in this season. He's put his stamp on the team. What's impressed you about Kirby Smart?
Well, just the way he's established, to change the culture of Georgia. I mean, it's a team, again, not to say they haven't been used to winning. Under Mark Richt, they've won 10 games 10 times in 15 years here, but it's just a different attitude about Georgia right now. You mentioned the defensive acumen. It's a defensive-minded club, but the offense is playing pretty well right now. They're two in the SEC and scoring offense.
That's true.
It's not like they're just shutting people out or whatnot. They're getting it all done all the way around. And plus, the special teams has been very efficient this year, punting, kicking, but that defense. So it's really been the calling card as we've seen, in most of the games this year.
Is there something that you, when considering the difference between Smart last year to this year, do you notice anything where you go, wow, that's something that he's really done a better job of, which happens when you've never been a head coach before, and then it's your second year?
I don't know if anything specific that jumps out, other than just the fact that the players in the second year in his system, they know the coaches a lot better.
Okay.
Offensively and in particular. I mean, they've been under now, Jim Chaney for 2 years. They know what to expect. Same thing with defense, working with Mel Tucker. I mean, everybody knows what to expect. There's no questions, no mysteries out there. They just go out and play.
How are the fans? How did they take to Mark Richt leaving and then Kirby Smart coming in? How did that process go with the fans?
Well, you still probably got a certain amount of fans who were upset that Coach Rick, was let go. He was a very popular coach for 15 years at Georgia, but the program wanted to take the next step. They wanted to start competing for more SEC titles, something the program hasn't won since 2005. They wanted to be in the playoff picture. Right now, 7 games in, they are. So I think people are very excited. They're happy with what Kirby Smart has done, and when the change was made, Kirby Smart's name was the first one on a lot of people's lips who they wanted to take over the job, and they got what they wanted.
What about what this team needs to do to get better? We talked in the beginning of the show about the fact that even if the team did lose one game in the last 5 games this season, as long as they went to the SEC championship game and played Alabama, the winner of that game is going to the playoffs. So I'm sure you guys know that. So, but what do they have to do to get better to make sure if and when they do play Alabama, that they'd be able to beat the Tide?
Well, there's still areas on defense they need to improve. I mean, Coach Smart has talked several times this week about improving the way they affect the opposing quarterback. Something they have kind of struggled a little bit with in the past 3 or 4 games. Only, I believe, 5 sacks over the last 4 contests. Have got to do a better job in the secondary. They gave up 2 deep balls to Missouri last week, a couple of 63-yard touchdown passes. Have got to improve there. Offensively, there's always things you can improve on. Receivers can always do a better job catching, and linemen can always do a better job what they do up front. So it's Coach Smart's never going to be a coach who's going to be satisfied with what he sees from his team. There's always going to be ways they can get better.
Now, I know you haven't played some of the top teams yet in the SEC, so I'm going to ask you about Notre Dame because they're playing well. They've got the one hiccup, and it was a very close game. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that want to know whether Notre Dame has turned the corner, and Notre Dame's got some big games coming up themselves. So what did you think about Notre Dame and the program in that game? Did you sense anything, any changes, positive or negative? Because they, again, not much was expected from Notre Dame this year.
It wasn't, but Notre Dame, remember, came into that game, had rushed for over 400 yards in the season opener. And since the Georgia game, I think, has averaged around 300 yards rushing, in the game since. But Georgia held them that night to 22 yards on the ground. I think that speaks again to what a job Georgia's defense has done. But Notre Dame obviously put that game behind them. Is playing very well right now. Big game Saturday against Southern Cal, one of their traditional rivals, and they bounce well for Notre Dame. They can be a team that people are talking about for the playoffs too before all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's possible. What about this Florida matchup next week? Is this game, of course, so huge? So how's the mood as far as the fans? Because Florida hasn't exactly lit it on fire this year, especially on offense. They're going to bring it on defense, but the offense just hasn't looked very good.
Yeah, Florida struggled offensively. I mean, Jim McElwain talked about that today on the SEC teleconference. But this is a game, Florida's had Georgia's number for the past 25, 26 years. I've been covering Georgia long, 20 years now. I've only seen Georgia beat them 4 times. That kind of lets you know how, often what kind of success Georgia's had of late against this team. So, that's one they've got to get over. I mean, you talk to the kids, they don't think about the past. They don't think what past teams have done. And if Georgia, just based on what they have this year, I think they've got a very good chance of winning. But again, we've seen weird things happen in college football, but, even going back to last week. So it's a game they can't take lightly for sure.
All right, Angel, you've been covering this team for a long time. Last question I want to ask you is with all the teams that you've seen, how does this team compare, even from just the last 5 or 10 years? Is this potentially the best team?
Yeah, we'll see about that. I mean, I know the 2017 that beat Hawaii, finished second in the country that year, was very good. And there were a couple of teams in Mark Richt's first couple of years that were excellent teams that finished in the top nationally. But this Georgia team, I've said before, this defense, I think, has a chance to be the best defense Georgia's had in the past 15 seasons. If they can get this offense keep clicking like it is right now, they're going to be a threat. But I'm going to wait just a little bit longer before I say it's the best Georgia team I've seen up in here.
All right. Well, we hope that if things keep going well, we'll get another opportunity to talk to you, especially if they do play Alabama in the SEC championship game, which I know between you and me, we both know they're playing.
It looks like I would be extremely surprised if I'm not in Mercedes-Benz Stadium first weekend of December.
Anthony, I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, that's Anthony Dasher. By the way, Anthony, you can follow him on Twitter at Anthony Dasher1. That's the number 1. And again, he covers Georgia football for ugasports.com. That's ugasports.com. And that is part of the Rivals Sports Network. So I want to thank Anthony very much for taking his time out to talk to us today about what's going on with the Georgia Bulldogs, Kirby Smart year 2. Of course, it was a few weeks ago that we put Georgia in our national championship list. So right now, they are sitting pretty as far as the rankings are concerned, but the rankings still don't mean anything because they don't. I mean, all that matters. See, the players, the coaches, the fans don't have to worry about anything to do with rankings right now. All they got to do is take care of their own business. And like I said, even if they don't take care of their own business in one game, as long as I came at the SEC championship game, now that would be interesting, to tell you the truth, because the way I think about it, I'm like, I wonder if Alabama ran the table and the only loss they had was against Georgia in the SEC championship game. Would the committee put him in the playoffs? And then you got to go, yeah, well, let's see. It all depends this and all depends that. Yeah, it does. But look, you're not going to get undefeated teams because it just rarely happens. So let's say you got one undefeated team. Okay, that means that, and then let's say Georgia beats Alabama. So now Alabama's sitting there with, say, 2 other teams with 1 loss, which is probably about right. Do you really think, even if because they're going to be number 1 at that point, because they'd be number 1 all season, they would be number 1 all the way to the SEC championship game. So if they were to lose that game, do you honestly think that they would drop out of the top 4? I don't. But what about Georgia? What would happen if Georgia went undefeated and then lost the SEC championship game? Would they get the same consideration as Alabama? Somehow, I doubt it. Now, it all depends on the game. If it's a close game, which I would imagine it would be, that we would hope would come into play. And maybe they would also learn the lessons of last season, which, of course, as you know, we were very critical of. Penn State. Now, look, I can sit there and I could understand and I completely get why USC did not get in over Washington last season. I mean, yeah, head-to-head means an awful lot in my mind, even though, of course, the committee will pick and choose when head-to-head means anything. Like last year, remember? The question would be posed to them regarding Ohio State, Penn State, and after when everybody found out Ohio State was in, then they posed the question about head-to-head, and the committee members were like, or the top committee member was like, "Oh yeah, well that's that we take that into account, but it's not. It doesn't really mean as much as you think." And you know why? Because they're trying to build their own narrative. That's why they're fitting their own narrative into why they want Ohio State in over Penn State. That's all that was. That's it. But you look at the USC situation with Washington. Now that was different because Washington went into the finale with 1 loss and USC went into the finale with 3 losses, and that's just too much. I mean, look, I would have still would like to have seen USC in, but you're not going to get in that way. It's just not going to happen, and I understand that. That is something I do get, especially since USC didn't even win their division title. Okay, yet it didn't mean anything to the committee that Ohio State didn't win their division title, nor that they didn't beat Penn State, the team that they were able to leapfrog or get in. They were ahead of them in the rankings. So the point, though, is will Georgia get the same respect Alabama will get? No, they won't. They just won't. And we saw that with Ohio State and Penn State. I said this, and I think Trevor Matich also said this, and he was spot on, that if you switched uniforms last year, you switched identities, and Ohio State was Penn State, and Penn State was Ohio State last year, and they just looked at the teams and judged them on that criteria that they had. No doubt in Trevor Matich's mind, no doubt in my mind, that they would have won Ohio State. Okay? If Ohio State had beaten Penn State at home and then won the division, and even though they had one more loss, it wouldn't have mattered They would have put Ohio State in. They would have been like, well, why wouldn't? Because nobody would have even argued over it anyway. It would have been like, oh, how can Ohio State not get into the playoffs? They won their division. Of course, and they won the Big Ten championship. Of course they're going to the playoffs. Who cares if they have 2 losses and any other team has 1 loss? Of course they're going in. But because it happened to Penn State, oh, well, wait a second. Head-to-head don't mean as much. And, yeah, we have to kind of consider the win at Oklahoma. And Penn State didn't have any big wins. Again, trying to fit their narrative. So I think Georgia would be best served to just make sure that no matter what they do, that if they wind up losing 1 game this year, just 1 before the postseason, make sure you lose that game before the SEC championship game. Because you lose the SEC, and look, if you lose a game and then lose the SEC championship game, though that even gets you in a situation where you pretty much don't have a chance. I mean, I'd still give you. Now, me personally, I'd still put you in the conversation. I'd have to see who you're battling it out, which other teams that we're talking about. But if you wind up losing one of these 5 games, then you're probably in a must-win situation in the SEC championship game. Now, I know we're probably getting ahead of ourselves because what if they did lose to Florida next week? Well, then we're in a bit of trouble? No, not really, because Florida has already lost 2 SEC championship games. 2 SEC games, so that doesn't really matter. And I can't imagine Georgia's going to lose to South Carolina or Kentucky at home. So Auburn would be the only other team, but when you take a look at Auburn, the game's on the road. That will be difficult. They're a very good defensive team. That will be difficult. But you know what? I cannot imagine Jarrett Stidham beating Georgia's defense. I'm just sorry. I can't. You can't beat LSU, and he looked absolutely ridiculously bad against Clemson. There's just no way. I'm sorry. I don't see it. I'm telling you, I'm extremely high on what's going on with this Georgia team. And Anthony is extremely confident that Jake Fromm is going to get this job done. And look, I said that just before Anthony came on as well. I believe that's going to be the case. That Fromm's going to continue to be the starter here now, but it's going to. And I don't know if it. I don't want to throw injury into the equation, but a game. Let's say it's 3-3 Florida late in the 3rd quarter. The Georgia off and Fromm's got 2 picks or something, and it's his worst game as a freshman, as in college, and whatever. It's just a bad game. Everybody has them. Will Kirby Smart go to Eason? Because if he does, and Eason then bails him out, then it's Eason's team again. So that's kind of the deal here. That's where I think I agree with what Anthony says, and I think Anthony would agree with that. But it just all depends on whether or not Fromm finds himself in that situation. And of course, for his sake, he would like to have a bad game in a situation where it's not a close game against a better team. And if that can happen, and look, I think this goes all the way to Auburn as well, because that's still a month away. So I don't think it matters how late in the season it is. I think that you have a player like Eason sitting on the bench, and because Fromm's a freshman, if something were to go wrong in even that game, and it's just not, and you can just tell. But now look, this is all. I'm not going to speak for Kirby Smart because I'm being a Michigan fan. Look what I'm having to deal with Harbaugh. As much as I love Harbaugh, everybody has a flaw. Everybody. Every coach has a flaw. And Harbaugh's flaw, which is strange, but in a way, it's probably because of his loyalty and him being a former quarterback and the fact that he had to, fight and scrap. And, he wasn't this big time prospect guy. He was a guy that really had to earn everything, that he seems to favor the underdog. He's favoring the Wilton Spates. He's favoring the John O'Corns when neither one of them is capable of engineering a national championship team. But for some reason, he keeps doing it. No matter how poorly O'Corn plays, he's got 2 big-time recruits sitting on the bench at number 2 and 3 on the depth chart, Peters and McCaffrey, and he's not going to play those guys, which is why they're going to get killed on Saturday night at Penn State. So every quarterback, every coach, and most of the time, if a coach does have a weakness, a lot of times it is the quarterback position. It's their inability to make the right decision in the right game at the right time. And sometimes it's not even quarterback. We've talked a lot on this show and on these OFN shows over this season alone on the difference between giving a backup at quarterback, at running back, a shot. Not saying, oh, you're the starter now, but just giving them a shot if the guy who's starting is not getting the job done. And I mean, we talked about it last week with Khalil Tate from Arizona. And what did he do in his start last week against UCLA? Unbelievable game again. And in 2 weeks, he has been phenomenal. I mean, he is he has single-handedly turned Arizona around this year. Single-handedly. It was funny because the analyst, and I think I was watching the Arizona State-Washington game, and one of the analysts, they showed a highlight. They went to a break, and they showed Tate scoring a touchdown against UCLA. They came back, and they go, oh, boy, Rich Rodriguez, he's really got things going there, doing a great job. And, boy, he's got Tate, blah, blah, blah. But they had almost made it sound like that. And, look, I like Rodriguez as an offensive guy. I've always said that for years, that you can say whatever you want about Rich Rodriguez. But Rich Rodriguez was one of the pioneers of the spread offense in college football. So you go back to so Rodriguez, though, it wasn't like he said, oh, okay, I tell you what, I really think that things aren't going well at quarterback, so I am with Dawkins, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play Tate. I see something in Tate, or even not just I see something, it's, I gotta give somebody else a shot. So Tate, you go in. And then Tate plays great, and then you can pat Rich Rodriguez on the back for making a good call. That's not what happened. Okay? Arizona, if Dawkins didn't get hurt, Arizona would be in the same situation today that they were in 2 weeks ago before the injury. And it was just a minor injury. It wasn't a major injury. It was just a little bit of an injury, and he needed to have Tate go in to replace Dawkins. He goes in, and lo and behold, he goes absolutely just bananas. And what did he have? Tate last week had 327 yards rushing with 4 touchdowns. Amazing. 230 rushing this past week. 557 yards rushing in his first 2 games as a quarterback. So Rodriguez gets lucky because, and he even said, he goes, well, I mean, I didn't, this is something I didn't see in practice. We didn't see this, blah, blah, blah. See, that's the whole point. Coaches are so close to what's going on. See, as fans, we're not there at practice every day. So it's easier for us to take the personal equation out of it, because it's personal when you're constantly with these kids and you're constantly critiquing them. And you're breaking every little, pro and con about their performance down. And when one player is doing a better job than the other player in practice, it's easy for the coach to be like, well, this guy is better. He's doing it better when I ask him to do it in practice, so he's the guy. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes players, I think I've said this like 100 times. In 10 years, maybe 1,000 times. Sometimes players are better when the lights are on and there's an actual game taking place as opposed to in practice. Not all of them, but a good percentage of them just are better in the game than in practice. And it's up to the coach to figure that out and to say, I know he hasn't been playing particularly well in practice, but this guy, the starter, I've given him chances and chances and chances. You know what? I'm going to give the other guy a shot. I'm just going to give him a shot. I'm going to give him a half. I'll give him a game. I'll give him a couple series. I'll give him a shot. And if he had just given Tate a shot, just a couple of series before Dawkins got hurt, he never would have been able. That's all he would have needed to see. And he would have realized, whoa, we got something here. So that's the thing. We don't know about Kirby Smart on if the situation comes about. Will he say, you know what? Fromm's been here all year. I owe it to him. I owe it to him to stick with him. I'm going to allow him to get himself out of trouble. Will he do that? Because if he does that and Fromm doesn't get himself out of trouble and it costs Georgia a football game, it might cost them the season. So and this is the reason that this is what frustrates me. I don't understand why, if you have to make that decision, why you feel it's got to be the be all end all. Why you have to feel that if you make that decision, you can't go back. You know, if the team's struggling, say at halftime, and let's say again, I'm just going to use Georgia as an example. So let's say they're down 14-3 to Florida at halftime, and Fromm's thrown 2 picks, and he's playing his worst game of the season. Because it's already halftime, what you can do is you're going to say, okay, I tell you what I'm going to do. Jacob, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm going to let you play a few series. I don't know how many. Could be 1, could be 2 or 3. You could play the whole half. I have no idea. But I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to see if we can spark something here. And I'm not going to say, well, I'll let Fromm play at least 1 more series in the second half, because that doesn't work. Because then all of a sudden you just find yourself crippling yourself, especially if there's a long drive, and then all of a sudden you realize you've only had 1 possession in the third quarter. Before you know it, then you feel like it's too late. Oh, I've already stuck with them for 3 quarters. I might as well keep it. You know, I don't want to put the pressure on Eason in 1 quarter. So if you're in that situation, you do it then, and then you give him a couple of chances. That's it. Goes out there, plays a series or 2. You go, you know what? Now I'm not seeing anything. And maybe with Fromm sitting on the bench, taking a look at what's going on, gathering himself, you know what? Maybe he's ready to go back in and do something here. Because I've seen that happen a lot. Sometimes quarterbacks just need to take a seat, take a look at what's going on, maybe get themselves fired up, and they get back in there, and then they do their job. So anything can happen. I've seen variables in every situation over my entire life watching football. Thousands and thousands of games. And I've seen these situations work and not work, and a whole bunch of different varieties of how things can work one way or another. But not doing anything, not pulling the trigger, is always the worst thing to do. It always is. Rarely does that work. Statistically, it just doesn't. Now, sometimes it does. Sometimes, your confidence and patience works, and all of a sudden the light turns on, the player starts playing better, and everything is great for the season, and there you go. But I'm telling you, it doesn't happen often. It just doesn't. Now, for Georgia fans, I'm sure that they would just like Fromm to play well the rest of his season and not have to be in that spot, and everybody's happy. And then you know what? Then Jacob Eason probably transfers. But the situation might occur. And if it does, I certainly hope whatever Kirby Smart decides to do, he does the right thing, because I want to see Georgia in the SEC championship game, and I want to see Georgia beat up on Alabama in the SEC championship game. So it's personal for me. Not as personal as Georgia fans, but it's personal for me. All right, so tomorrow, Robert Kuwata, Fresno State football writer, is going to join me from the Fresno Bee. Also, Steve Irvine, UAB football analyst, color analyst, and also writer for Blazers 247, and Texas A&M football columnist at TexAgs.com, Olin Buchanan. And by the way, you might be saying, okay, you told me why Fresno State and Tedford and Keyshawn Johnson, and we know about Texas A&M, but UAB? Did he say that he's going to have somebody on from UAB? Yes. And I've always been very proud. I've had a proud career in the media and I say this every season, that we don't come on here and placate to just teams from the SEC. So obviously, love having Anthony on, love talking about Georgia. How can you not? best conference in college football. That's extremely relevant. But you know what? You know what's relevant to Alabama Birmingham fans? UAB, Alabama Birmingham football team. That's relevant to them. And you know what it's also relevant to? Are the other fans in the Conference USA. It's relevant to them because that's their conference. And why are they not important? They're an FBS team. They're not FCS. They're FBS. So, but we're always going to bring on coaches, writers, players from teams all over the FBS. But hey, obviously they got to be doing something right. And that's what's going on at UAB. Bill Clark is doing a fantastic job. And Spencer Brown, the freshman running back for UAB, is off to a great start in his career. It is just a great story of what's going on at UAB. They have beaten the two of the top teams in back-to-back weeks in Conference USA, Louisiana Tech and Middle Tennessee State. And they're going to be at Charlotte this week. You look at their schedule. They are the two toughest teams that they played all year on paper. They just played in the conference. Now, it's not going to be easy for them. I mean, Southern Miss on the road and Texas San Antonio on the road. But this is a team that is going to have a legitimate chance. And the way it's going right now with 4 wins on the season, they're going to go to a bowl this year. Nobody would have thought that. Because all they got to do is win 2 more games, and they play Rice at home and UTEP at home. That's it. It's over. They're already going bowling. So that's a great story of what's going down at UAB. And because the Conference USA is so weak this year, and maybe that's part of the reason UAB is able to win these games. And it is. And look, Middle Tennessee State, Stockstill's out, so that's a big loss. I get it. But with Brom out of Western Kentucky, that program, no, it's not the same team we've seen the last couple of years. I think I mentioned this last week on the College Football Show that we think Marshall now is the team to beat in the East. We still believe that. But you know what? UAB can win the West. Now, I do think North Texas is going to have something to say about that. Really like what's going on there. Luttrell is doing a really nice job. We've mentioned that before the last year and a half. So believe that. But yeah, North Texas and UAB could very well be 2 teams that could wind up playing for the opportunity to play in the championship game. Now, they're not playing each other this season. Well, excuse me, they've already played this season. But that was in North Texas, so that's an advantage for North Texas. That was actually the only loss for UAB inside the conference. But that was a very close game, a 3-point game. But that gives North Texas a little bit of an edge. But we'll talk UAB football tomorrow with Steve Irvine and find out what on earth is going on down at Birmingham with this incredible story. And it's a fun one. So I wanted to have him on to talk about it. So that's tomorrow. And by the way, what we're doing now is we have scheduled interviews, and this is going to be more commonplace now. We just got the Ourlads Football Network up and running this season, so we had a lot of things on our plate. Fantasy NFL, fantasy college, you name it. We've been doing as much as we can to give you as much information as we can in both the NFL and college game and throwing some fantasy in there. So now that we've finally been able to kind of catch up with some things and the season is kind of underway now, mid-season, just about, that's where we are, mid-season, that this was a good opportunity to start getting the interviews in, trying to find the teams with these types of stories and what's going on. So these interviews will be standalone. Now, sometimes with Anthony, we'll be able to book somebody on shows like this. That's going to happen. But for the most part, a lot of these interviews would be standalones. So tomorrow, what you would have to do for the live shows, if you want to listen live, and that's only a timing issue because everybody likes to be on demand nowadays. Anytime you want to listen to a live show, you just go to our production website at Prime Sports Network. You go there. All you got to do is go to the website, click on the live button, and you listen, and you can listen to the shows live. But this show, as well as anything else that we produce, always going to be available usually within the hour, and we'll make it available on our website at Prime Sports Network under Prime Sports Network on YouTube and under iTunes. And of course, check back at Ourlads.com where the shows would be posted. So, and we always tweet it out. You can go to PrimeSN, that's our Twitter handle, and that's how you can check out exactly when it is that these shows are available. So tomorrow I'll have back-to-back interviews. So probably every interview will probably be about 20 minutes long. So again, Robert Kawada, Fresno State 12. We'll take a few minutes break. Come back with Steve Irvine at 12:30 for UAB. Take another couple of minutes off. Come back with Allen Buchanan to talk Texas A&M football at 1. Then tomorrow afternoon. Don't have a time yet. We never do until usually Wednesday night, Thursday morning. But we'll have our NFL preview for Week 7 with Tony Mejia. So we'll go over every game, top stories in the NFL, we'll go game by game, injury updates, trends, so forth, and picks. And then Friday, right now we have it scheduled for 3 o'clock. That's our college football show. So we'll get you ready for Week 8. And we'll also, of course, have our injury report available for you before Friday, or actually before Saturday's games in college football as well. And don't forget to tune in on Sunday mornings now at 9 o'clock for our fantasy football game day show with Jamal Murphy and Dan Weinrich. So tomorrow, that's when we'll be on again. Back-to-back interviews, and then we'll have our NFL preview show on the Ourlads Football Network with Tony Mejia sometime probably between 2 and 4 o'clock. I think we've been usually coming on about 3:30 in the afternoon live when we've been doing that show, but don't quote me yet on tomorrow's show. I'll tell you what, we started off with some Georgia sound. Why don't we end with some Georgia sound?
Into the camp. It was
How about this? Well, this isn't sound, but this is their
105
pump
guys
up
committed to
anthem.
the process that we want to have a successful season.
How about this?
To go the extra mile and be committed.
We got to pump you up to be a Georgia Bulldog fan. Don't forget the Ourlads.com depth charts. Best in the business for the NFL and college football. Just in case you didn't realize it, college football depth charts. And follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Don't forget you can follow Anthony Dasher on Twitter at AnthonyDasher1.
We already won, coach. It done, coach. Pass on 4th and 1, coach. Win every game on the road, but Sanford, they can't come, coach. Linebacker got it on lock. Running hill, get your head smashed. Strong safety hit you so hard, make the other coach throw a red flag. My cornerback got a pick six. He caught it with one hand back. We scored again, now never leaked. I jumped up my fan. My whole line, they make a play. That hold down on a bad game. Running back like to turn it up. Quarterback the truth with the pad game. Red jersey and last name. In the SEC, we in our own lane. A minute left, we up by 2. No, we ain't lose no home game. We go hard, we practice hard, we play hard, so we the best. Let's win it all, let's get a ring, be number 1 in the BCS. Yeah. Ballin', yeah, we ballin'. We going for the ring, let them dogs out. That red and black finna win the game. We going for the ring. I know you see we ballin'. Ballin', yeah, we ballin'. We going for the ring.